Hi and welcome to another tutorial. In today's lesson we'll learn how to recreate this cool looking looping circle effect using Adobe After Effects. So anyways guys, let's jump in. So the first thing that we have to do here is we have to create a new composition, and I'm just going to run with a 1920 by 1080 pixel document, 30 FPS at a duration of about 15 seconds. Just press OK. Once you have that, then the next thing that you will need to do is you will need to create your circle. So what I'm going to do is find the ellipse tool over here. I'm going to set the fill to black, and I'm also going to set the stroke to white, and I'll probably have the stroke size at around about 12. Now I am going to click on this title action safe so I can see this point in the middle, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Command and Shift and draw a circle, something like that. Then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to align it to the center of that composition just so I know it's in the center. So once I've done that, all I need to do is click on the select tool and then hold shift and then just move it until it gets to that side over there. Once I have done that, then what I need to do is I need to go to this button over here, which is the toggle 3D layer. If you don't see that, you can always press toggle switches. And then what I need to do is I'm just gonna go to the active camera, make sure I go to top, make sure that you're in classic 3D, not advanced 3D. And then what we are going to do is we are going to wrap these circles around this middle point. So there is a pretty cool way of doing this. What we need to do is we need to go and open up the transform settings. And then when you go to the Y rotation, I'm gonna hold Alt or Option. And then in here, I'm going to write index -1, close bracket, and then times the amount of degrees you want each shape to be. So I want it to be 10 degrees, so it will go all the way around in 10 degrees increments. If you want it bigger, smaller, you can change that value if you want. Now, nothing happened, but when we go and press Command or Control D to duplicate, you can see that now those circles are being duplicated. And all I'm gonna do is just keep going until I get to that point there. So now I can change the view back to front, and now you can see all of the circles there, and that's looking pretty cool. So now the next thing that we need to do is I'm just gonna right click and then go to new null object. I'm gonna click on the first shape layer, go all the way down to the bottom, and then I'm just gonna grab this and pick whip it to the null one. I need to make sure that that is a 3D layer. I also need to open this up, and we are going to animate the Y rotation. So if I come back down here and I hold Option or Alt, click on that stopwatch and write time times, let's say 20, depending on how fast you want it to spin. Now you will see that it spins at that level. So that looks pretty cool, but I also want it to be rotated as well. So the easiest way to do this is to create another new null object. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna pick whip null1 to null2, make sure that it's a 3D layer. Then we can open up the transform properties, and now we can move the X and Z rotation. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna make sure that it fits inside this whole area. So now that you've got your rotation, if you press S for scale, now you can actually scale it down and make it fit inside that area. So I'm just it just goes off a little bit over there and a little bit over there. But I'm pretty happy with that, and I like the rotation angle, and I think that's looking pretty cool. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna highlight all those layers, go to layer, pre-compose, and I'll just call it shapes. And now I'll have it in there, and if it did move around a bit, you can always move it back to where you need it to go. And so now we're up to the final touches here where we can just kind of dress it up. We need to make the background as well as just adding a little bit of effects on here. So the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to create a new solid. We're just going to call it BG. All right, I'm going to put it at the bottom. We are going to search for the effect called gradient ramp. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to color hunt, and this is the color palette that I'm using. So here are the colors in Color Hunt, and I want this dark color to be for the background. So I'm going to click on that, and then I'm going to go into After Effects. I'm going to replace the white color with that dark color. I'm going to change the shape to a radial ramp. I am going to move the start of the ramp to the middle of the composition, and then the end of the ramp to maybe somewhere over here. And then you can even go swap colors, and you can play around with that if you want. The next thing that we need to do on our shapes layer is add some turbulent displace. So you can go in here and you can fine tune how much of the warpiness do you want. So I'm probably gonna go with maybe something like, let's say maybe 40 for the size, and maybe change the amount to maybe around 47 or so. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hold Option or Alt, click on the evolution and write time times 10. And so now we are going to have a warping kind of rotation with those circles as well. So another thing that we are going to put on here is another Video Copilot effect, which is called VC Color Vibrance. If you don't have this, you can skip this, or you can use tint or something like that. But now that I've got this color in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Color Hunt, and I'm just going to choose a different color, and then I'm going to paste it in here. And so now it's got the outline of that with VC Color Vibrance, and I'll leave the link in the description. Then what we needed to do is also add some glow. Now you don't want too much glow here, but I'm just going to increase the threshold to about 80. And if you want to increase the, the radius a bit, you can, but I'm going to leave it like that, and maybe even change the glow intensity to 0.8. So now we have, like a little bit of a glow on those shapes. And the final thing we are going to add in here is we are going to add some CC glass. So CC glass really kind of makes the effect. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in here and just change a few settings. So you can play around with the softness. So if you don't want too much of that kind of glassy kind of look, you can change it there, or you can play around with the height as well. So I didn't really go with too much there. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'll just leave it at 11 and 18. I did go into the lighting as well, and you can change around some of the light intensity if you want, or you can make it a little bit brighter. So I just bumped that up slightly. And then also in shading, I increased the roughness slightly, and I also increased the specular. So you can play around with some of those settings to get something that you like. But once you're happy with it, then the final thing that you can do is add some noise. So if you go and if you add a new adjustment layer and then search for the effect, which is called noise, and bump that up to about 10%, now you've got some noise and grain on that as well. So yeah, cool. So that's about it for this tutorial. I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.